Hi everyone, Catherine Moore here. I'm going to talk a little bit about my final project called the Mobile Museum. The goal for my project is to create an app that allows students to curate their own galleries and to really kind of break the mold that we've created for ourselves. For final exams and standardized testing as a way to judge what we've learned in a history or in an art history class. Over the years, I think we've kind of created this culture for ourselves where history and learning about it has become this passive experience where we're told facts, dates, names, where we memorize them, we spit them back out on a test. We don't really retain them, and we don't really learn critical thinking skills, how to apply things in context, to question their validity, to make those connections to the world around it. We kind of just learn about facts in isolation. So the goal for my project is to help reinforce these critical thinking skills and get students to engage with the things that they're learning, also as well with their peers. It can become sort of an isolated passive experience as well, learning about history, because you're just memorizing things. You're not really engaging with your peers, asking them their thoughts, their opinions, getting questions from feedback from them. So my app aims to kind of integrate all that together. So the concept for my app is students would be able to go in and they could have the option to either browse other public galleries that are exhibitions that already have been made, or they can choose to create their own. And in theory, they would be creating their own, either as like a final exam project to kind of tie in everything together that they've learned, or just for like a midterm project or something of the like, but probably a final exam project would be the most applicable use for it. So they could go create their own gallery, they could name it, and they are kind of given this open-ended problem to solve where you have all of these things, you have this giant list of artifacts from all over the world, all time, space. Now pick out pieces that you think go together, put them together to tell a story about history, or to answer a question or to solve a problem. So they'll get the option to choose from hopefully what would be a vast library of artifacts. Ideally, they'd be rendered in 3D so that if students chose to click on one to see a little bit more about it, they would have the option to zoom into it, to kind of rotate it around 360 degrees, so that way they could really see it as if they were actually holding it hands-on. They would also be able to get to see the basic metadata for the artifact, just so they know like where it was found, if it was from a culture that was other than where it was found, or if it was found in a place native to where it was made and used, things like where it was from date-wise, place of origin, like I said, just like the basic dimensions of it, what it was made of, things like that. I wouldn't want to get too much into the interpretation of it beyond providing the basic metadata, because you don't want to run the risk of installing any sort of bias coming into it and making their selections. So we would just keep the metadata very basic. So we would have options to kind of add them to a cart, we'll say, put them all together, and when they're ready, they can go and say, create my gallery, and then they'll be placed into this kind of virtual reality gallery space. Originally, it will just be, or starting out, I should say initially, it will just be 4 kind of white walls, but they have the option to walk through the gallery, kind of see it real time, and add the pieces where they would like on all the walls. And it would be nice too if they also had the ability to kind of add structural elements, so like temporary sliding walls that will come out, pedestals, shelves, things like that, just so they really can kind of create the gallery like real curators do in a museum, to how they would like it to tell the story they're trying to tell. So they get to place things, they could take them on and off the walls, move them other places. They could have the option, kind of once an item's been used, have it grayed out in their selection area. That way they know it's been used. They don't have to worry about adding it twice, just to kind of improve the user experience. And then once they have everything placed how they'd like it, they would go and they would start adding in labels and wall text. And this really, I think, kind of helps tie a lot of things together and adds that extra layer beyond just putting things on a wall that I thought looked cool together and really giving the context and the meaning to the exhibitions. They would go in and they would be able to add their museum labels. They would already come pre-filled with all the metadata that was in the original item selection, but now they can go say how it was used, or their interpretation of how it was used, why they think it's important, why it's included, and its kind of connections to the rest of the items in the exhibition. So they can do that with all of the museum labels, and I would probably maybe even make it a requirement that each one had a museum label, because I think those are invaluable to learning and making those connections, whether they're good or bad, to be honest, in real life. Sometimes museum labels have a lot of bias and not the most accurate information, and that can affect how we learn and how we perceive things in relation to each other one way or another. So they're important nonetheless. And then I would also have the option to go and make wall text. So like when you walk into galleries or exhibitions, whatever have you, you kind of see in the beginning there's like vinyl wall text where it says, you know, what the exhibition's about, some background information maybe about the culture that the things are from, or events tied around where these items were found, things like that. So I think that would be important to have too, because again, you're challenging them to not just place items on a wall, but really add that extra layer of why is it important, thinking critically about the cultures that made them, the events that happened that brought these things together, how they affect us today. So they would have the option to do all that, just like a curator would in an exhibition. So once that is all done, their selections are how they like them, then they can choose to save their gallery. They can make it public, or they can make it private if it's just something for a school project that they don't really want out there. If they made it private, I would assume, maybe get something like a shareable link, like a direct link, and they could even password protect it if they really, really cared to that much. Otherwise, they can just make it public, and within the app itself, it would be searchable. I can't imagine this would be something that would just be kind of on a general site that you could just Google search for. It may have to be something a little bit more specific, but it would be available on the site to view other projects. And then where I really see this having some value is students would be able to go into each other's galleries, and it'd be really cool if they could kind of save as a copy of their own copy of another student's gallery and kind of move things around so it doesn't affect the original, but you do get some really interesting insights of maybe student A created gallery A. Student B comes in and edits gallery A to now become gallery B, and kind of to see the differences and their own interpretations of how these items interact with each other. So I think that has some really good value. But overall, on a larger scale, the objectives for this app, like I said before, would be getting those having those students play a more active role, and not just having the teaching of history be this passive experience, but teaching them those critical historical thinking skills, teaching them about context, thinking about how to ask questions, being able to use primary source documents, which I think would also be interesting if there was a tag under each artifact, if there were primary sources available that were about the item, to be able to view those to help aid in your museum labels, your text, whatever have you, just also to give you a little bit more of layers or depth to your understanding of the pieces. But back to teaching those kids those skills, also a huge thing that Weinberg talks about in his articles, especially the one on the standardized tests, was that, and in the article that we talked about the hypothesis, rethink, classroom connection kind of framework for learning, which is really what I followed for my own application, is that people are almost afraid to take standardized tests. They're this very final thing. You take the test, it's either right or it's wrong, and then you're graded as such. And that to students is a lot of pressure, and it kind of forces them to really, again, fall into that just memorizing for the test habit and not really getting that extra layer of learning out. So I think by making this not an exam, not a standardized multiple choice test, but making something that they work on over time and something that's really kind of living, breathing, and evolving before it gets to its final state. Even if I don't even think you could call its final state a final state, because it can always be modified based on who looks at it, or they go read something else. So taking that kind of pressure off of an evaluation, we'll call it, not a test, I think gives kids the freedom, or gives students the freedom to not be afraid to make those weird connections, ask those bolder questions, and because they're not afraid that they're gonna get the wrong answer and it's gonna be marked wrong. So it gives them a little bit more freedom to explore their thoughts, explore those tough, kind of break down those tougher concepts without the penalty of F, because you got this number of questions wrong. And then for my audience, like I mentioned before throughout the video, I think this would be really helpful as a final exam project, just to tie everything in that kids have learned throughout the semester. They could be working on it, starting midterm time through the final semester. It doesn't have to say, you've got 1 week to do this or something like that. It can be an ongoing thing. Maybe it's something they work on throughout the whole semester, or pretty soon after they've started, just so it's something they can go back and revise, get feedback from their peers, and go again and keep on changing and evolving it until they're ready at the end of the semester to kind of show what they've gotten so far. I think college kids would probably be the best suited class for this, because while it's pretty straightforward in its application and its process, I think because we're really trying to encourage that deeper level of thought, those connections, those questions, I do think that there is, again, a kind of base layer of knowledge and understanding that you need, and critical thinking skills that you do need to have in order to kind of take it to the next level, that I think is best suited kind of starting at the freshman level in college and then taking it through. It would be really interesting to see maybe like a higher level history class do this, and have the gallery be passed around a couple times through like different people to see how it evolves, making it more of like a group effort, really making it collaborative, because your higher level history students hopefully, I'm not going to say it for a fact, but hopefully have a much better kind of honed and developed sense of critical thinking, questioning, historical thinking that we've talked about this whole semester. So it'd be really interesting to see some of the things they could do with that. But I think anything as low as a freshman in college, using it for a survey course would be interesting too, just to get them engaged and not have to have them stuck in this. You memorize that this happened in, 1400, and this war was from 1830 to, 1876, and this person did that. Like, it's getting people out of that rut, and it's engaging them with how we learn about the past and making them want to learn about it. So I hope you guys enjoy my project, and I welcome any feedback that you may have. Thanks.